This is Jerry Fry, audio historian of Pacific Pioneer Broadcasters. The following is the professional history of a PPB member, told by himself in his own words and in his own fashion on February 11th of 2008. These interviews are being audio taped in order to compile firsthand a living history of the members of our organization and the stories of their professional experiences. Many of our members began in what is now called the golden age of radio and television, and this is an attempt to preserve as much data as possible for succeeding generations. This recording is not intended for broadcast without first obtaining permission from Pacific Pioneer Broadcasters. And with me today in Hollywood is a gentleman whose name is ALISI, a board member of Pacific Pioneer Broadcasters, and with a fascinating background, I do believe we're going to find out. Art, welcome. Thank you for coming with us.
Thank you. I don't know how fascinating it will be, but let's talk about it.
Well, let's start at the beginning. Tell us where and when you were born, and a little bit about your growing up years.
Okay, I was born in the Bronx Maternity Hospital, which was on the Grand Concourse. That was like, the Riviera. And I don't know how we could afford it, but we got there anyway. And that was in August the 11th, 1928. And I spent most of my life in the Bronx, and I finally got into the service when I was 18. I enlisted, and I had the
Army, Navy, Air Force?
Army, the infantry. I enlisted for 18 months. It was the last day of the GI Bill of Rights.
Oh, you lucked out.
So it was October 5th, 1946, and came out here to California and went over to Japan, and then when I saw California, which I always thought was like the place, I said, I'm coming back here. And so then I came back here in 1959, and I've been here ever since.
Where did you go with your Army experience in California? Fort Ord or someplace?
No, Camp Stoneman, which is up in Pittsburgh, California.
Oh, really?
It's 60 miles from San Francisco.
San Francisco.
Yeah.
So it gave you a nice area view, boy.
Yes, it did.
And then tell us about the rest of your Army career.
Well, I only went 18 months. One of the reasons I joined at the time is because I wanted to be an actor. And I didn't want, my father was a baker and worked all the time, and I was an only son, and I thought, well, if I join the Army and I get the GI Bill of Rights, I can go out to acting school and become an actor.
Had you acted in high school?
High school, some high school plays and stuff, and so I did that. And then when I got out, I thought, well, gee, I ought to have a background in case it doesn't work. So I went to school and I took up merchandising. And I thought, well, wait a minute, I've got a background, I can always do something, and I did. For 12 years, I was Macy's Santa Claus.
Were you? At what? For heaven's sake.
That was my steady job. I always had 7 weeks of work at Macy's and in New York.
For heaven's sake.
Yeah. And it was fun because I would have friends would come with their children or relatives, and of course they didn't know I was Santa Claus, and I would sit down and I would say, "You don't eat your spinach, do you? You're not very good to your Aunt Alba, are you?" And they would look at me and they'd say, "He must be the real Santa Claus. He knows all about me."
Did you have a beard then, a real beard?
No, I didn't have a beard. I was, young. I was in my 20s, and but
Art has a beard today. That's why I'm asking.
But you had to in New York to collect unemployment insurance. You had to work 13 weeks. Didn't matter if you just worked one day on a movie and you made $40 or $50, whatever you did. That counted as a week of work. So that always gave me 7. I only had to get 6 more, and so.
How did you happen to pick up merchandising? Now, that's not something I would think a kid your age would necessarily think of.
Well, I was working when I was about 12 years old. I was working at the corner drugstore, and I was also the soda jerk at the soda fountain, and I would deliver prescriptions. Then I escalated and went to Macy's at that time when I was 16, and I was working as a salesman. Besides being the business before my Santa Claus days, and as a matter of fact, I worked there until I enlisted and left in the service. So I knew a little bit about the department stores, and I worked always like Saturday. Macy's used to be open they used to be open once a week, and that was Thursday night till 9 o'clock.
Mm-hmm.
So they would hire you for 12 hours a week. You would go there like at 4 or 5 in the afternoon, work until 9, and then you would work all day Saturday, an 8-hour day. So I knew what it was like. And I worked in all different departments, clothing, home furnishings.
So you did have a background there.
Yes, a little bit of that.
Sure.
And my favorite story was they put me one day in selling kitchen sets. Remember the chrome and the leather kitchen sets,
Sure.
red, green, and all. And on the center of each of the table, they had this wonderful tray. And I don't know how I did it, but I'd say to the people, look at this wonderful tray. You can take and bring your food and put it right in the center of the table, and then you could pick it up and then pick up the tray and then go back there. I never knew it was the to extend your table.
Oh, it was.
But I sold
You sold it as a tray.
As a tray for the extension.
Wow.
So,
you were a talented salesman.
So anyway, that was it.
Well, you must have some wonderful Santa Claus stories to
Yes,
tell.
I do. Oh, by that I used to get a lot of TV shows. I did the Jack Parr show.
You did?
Always the Santa Claus. They would come in,
Oh.
they always came to Macy's, and Robert Q. Lewis,
Mhm.
and what's the one where they gave you Treasure Hunt?
Yeah.
And every year they would always come to Macy's and say, we want a Santa Claus for the Lassie show. And I mean, so there's always this, and they'd always give it to me. They'd say, you go over and be Santa Claus. So.
And they already had filmed Miracle on 34th Street, so
Yes, they did.
you weren't in that.
No, anyways. So
Edmund Gwen might have been
No.
pushed out of a part. Had
No,
you
he
been-
wouldn't. He was marvelous. That's an unforgettable role.
Indeed,
Right,
indeed.
unforgettable.
So you came out of the Army
Mhm.
and came back to New York.
And I went and I started studying acting. I studied with the American Theater Wing,
Oh,
and then I went and studied with, along the way, I was doing a lot of little off-Broadway plays. And I was working at National Cash Register Company at the time, at 30 Rockefeller. And I would go to college. I went to City College at night, too, and did shows. And, off-Broadway, at the beginning of off-Broadway. I mean, I still remember going the first time Circle in the Square and seeing the wonderful actress, married Rip Torn, Geraldine Page.
Page.
I can still remember her performance, and it was like the beginning. This is really good theater.
Mhm.
By that time, you could rent a theater for $50 a night and do a show.
Hmm.
And we'd get together and we'd do a show on a weekend.
gee.
So that was it, and then I got a John Golden scholarship, and I went to the American Theater Wing, not the American Theater Wing, I'm sorry. I went to the Shakespeare Festival in Stratford. They had opened, that was in 1955. They had opened the theater. It was going to be an answer to Stratford in England and Stratford in Canada.
Mhm.
And so I went. I left my job. I was working with National Cash Register then, and I went and I said, now I'll be an actor. I'm going to make a few dollars. And so I worked there, and I worked the first season, which was a beautiful theater. But I think they had. It didn't reach its peak. It's not there anymore. I mean, but after the third season, you had Katharine Hepburn and some wonderful actors, and there were some good actors in my season. The first season was Christopher Plummer. That's when I think he started getting his fame. Fritz Weaver, Jerry Stiller, Hurt Hatfield, Roddy McDowell, Lear Dane. I was just one of the soldiers, and then we did a student production. We would do that, and matter of fact, I did my scenes with Michael Leonard, and then I went and became an actor per se. So at that time, when they did a lot of movies in New York, I did Somebody Up There Likes Me, all as extra background people.
Sure.
And my best was I did a series called New York Confidential, and we were
Great show.
and we were in 34th Street at the station, and we were supposed to be background walking back and forth, and Ted Post directed, and then all of a sudden he says, "You sir, you can't come in here. We're actors are doing this." And I said, "Well, I'm one of the actors." He says, "You're one of the actors?" He said, "I thought you were a real person walking back and forth."
Ah,
And so then one of the actors couldn't do the line. He said, "Give it to you." Can you do-"
Really?
Yeah. So that was like, I said, "Oh, I'm going to be made now."
You
I
got
said,
a bump.
He's giving me a part and the thing. I broke the thing. Anyway, so...
you got a bump. I hope you got paid
got a
for it.
bump. Yep, we got a bump. Yeah, and
Yeah.
so that gave you... anyway. And then I guess what happened is I started doing summer stock. And we went to the... this is not radio and broadcasting, but anyway. But anyway, the second season I went to Cape Playhouse in Dennis, Mass. And I was there, and I did a thing with Bert Parks, which was a musical version of I played the chauffeur. And then we did with Jane Meadows, we did the play about the... it was originally done on Broadway with I can't think of the name. It's about the young boy who she goes to bed with him, and and someday you'll think about that. Please be kind.
Tea and Sympathy.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Tea and Sympathy. Bert Brinkerhoff was in it, and she was in it, and I had a little part. I played one of the teachers, and Jane Fonda was in the company, and we did restoration. And we studied during the day. And that was that. Then I went to the second season. I went to Ephrata, Pennsylvania, and we were in this little theater, which was right in Ephrata is near Reading. I don't know if you know that little theater in the round. And I did Hatful of Rain with Geraldine Brooks, and did some other shows with Donald Woods and Richard Arlen.
You were in your 20s now?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And then the next season, I'm going there because the other stuff in between doing the Little Off-Broadway. Then the next season, I went to in Long Island, and we did a season, and somebody had seen the production of Cat in a Hot Tin Roof, and invited the four main people in the play to come out here because they had taken over the El Centro Theater right here in Hollywood. And they had the first right to doing Cat in a Hot Tin Roof out here, since it had played here at the Huntington Hartford, and Alex Nichol directed. So I came out here for 6 weeks, and that was in 1959, in February. And we got extended another 6 weeks or 8 weeks, and I decided I wouldn't go back to New York, and I stayed out here. So I started doing some television, doing some more acting, and then I told you I went back to Southbury, Connecticut the following year because Mavis Neal and Tom Palmer were running the theater called the Westbury Playhouse. And I auditioned here and I got the job. And so this was an opportunity for me to go back at the East Coast. And it was 8 weeks of show, but I ended up doing Roman Candle. I came in like the 4th or 5th week, and Burt Metcalf was the first season. He had been done the first few shows, and then I replaced him after that. And we did Rashomon and quite a few other shows. And Burt came back, and he ended up producing MASH, and he did very well. And ran into him a few years ago, buying shoes. And so now what happens is I'm here.
And your family is all still back in New York?
Everybody's
back
in New
the
York.
Bronx.
Everybody's back in the Bronx, Queens.
How did they feel about you going into acting? Were they supportive?
Were they supportive? Well, I always supported myself. I didn't. Of course, you had love and and attention, but I was always able to. I had a budget like $100 a month.
No, I don't mean financially. I mean,
oh yeah,
some mothers or fathers particularly would look down at a son who wanted to be an actor.
Well, they knew I always wanted to do that since I could talk.
Oh, that's good.
Okay, but no, they were fine. They supported me. They enjoyed coming in there, and they had the patience to wait.
Yeah.
And I knew that I couldn't start a family and still be an actor at the same time.
Sure.
So anyway, when they opened CBS Television City, Merrill Heater and Bob Quigley were doing. They were doing Video Village in New York with Jack Norris, and that's when I told you he did not come when they moved here to the West Coast because he was having some difficulties with his wife, and they hired Monty Hall. and that was like the first hour of game shows, and that was that, and Double Exposure was the other show, half hour. And then they did a show for NBC called People Will Talk, and so I had an interview with them, and they knew I was. Oh, I forgot to tell you. In the interim, my mother was introduced by a woman named Bruna Gazzari. My mother and Dad are both came from Italy, and I'm the first generation here. And they came and introduced my mother and father. Bruna Gazzari, her son was Bill Gazzari, who owned Gazzari a Go-Go, but his first venture was he'd taken over the Slate Brothers and opened a restaurant. And he asked me if I would do him a favor and do the lunches for a couple of months when he started out. So I did the lunches. So Merrill and Bob and the crew would come there for lunch every once in a while. And so now there was an opening. So they knew who I was, and I had a meeting with them, and I said, would you like to work here? And I said, yes, I'd like to, and I'll tell you what I'll do. I'll work for you for 2 weeks. Don't pay me anything. Let me see if you like me and if I like doing this for you. They paid me the next week, and they kept me on ever since. So I stayed with them for close to 40 years with them as they would produce different shows. Still working with Merrill Heater right now. Bob Quigley is gone, God bless him. And so I started as a headhunter, and a headhunter was I'd go out in the street and stop people in the markets if I saw they were outgoing, or a waiter or a waitress that was outgoing. I'd say, would you like to be on television? And then I usually say, she'll tell you that I'm legit, you know.
Yeah.
So call me back. And from that, we did a show called PDQ with Jeannie. Jeannie was the associate producer of that show.
Gene Brown.
Gene Brown, yeah. And Dennis James was the MC. And a lot of Michael Landon's favorite show. He used to come and do it all the time. Then we did People Talk. We ended up doing another show at CBS called Celebrity Game with Carl Reiner. Still a headhunter. I was contestant coordinator on that one. And then we ended up doing Hollywood Squares, which I started as a contestant coordinator. Then I became the head contestant coordinator. Then I became I ended up being one of the supervising producers of some title, like executive in charge of production or whatever it was. But in the interim, they did a lot of game shows, Merrill and Bob, and I did them all. I was the only one that worked on all the shows, and that was High Rollers, Gambit, then became Las Vegas Gambit, and we did To Say the Least with Tom Kennedy. And so I worked with them. It was like 35 years with Merrill and Bob. And then when the shows all went off the air, there was like game shows were dead at the time. And Dan Fox, who had been with NBC, who did a lot of prizes with the major shows, anything that was done on NBC, had a company called Dan Fox. So I said, I'll come over there since I know all the producers and stuff, and it's going to be kind of fun. So we formed a company called PCI, Promotional Consideration, and we've been together like 25 years, I guess, 25. I don't even know how long it is. It's been so long. And we provide prizes or whatever your requests are for anybody, whether it's a special or a talk show or whatever. And we've done a lot of shows. I've got a whole list of them. I know the people. We've worked with everybody almost in this town. And some of the people have gone with other people, but then they always come back to us and say, can you get us out of this mess? We deliver. And might as well make a little plug there. And
How are you compensated for what you do then?
we get a contract.
Get a contract.
We get a contract, and right now we've got the #1 show, Wheel of Fortune. And we always did place some things on Wheel of Fortune, but now we are exclusive on Wheel of Fortune. So I have a staff. And matter of fact, right, we're having a meeting now with the Wheel of Fortune and telling them the next tapings what they would like to have, and they would come in. We have College Week, and so we'll get trips that college students would like, or if it's mom and me, we get family trips. If it's romance, we go out and get romance. And how we do this, we call up the different hotels and airlines. And the wonderful part that we have is that we're telling them they don't have to pay us. if you bought a 30-second commercial on Wheel of Fortune, it's over about $100,000. It varies time of the season.
Mm-hmm.
So what you're giving me for 10 seconds is a week at your hotel.
Yeah.
And so if you broke it down, it's worth over $30,000. And so we can sell that because we're not adding anything to it because we're being paid by the show.
Uh-huh.
And then we go to an airline. We say, you're giving me 2 tickets, it's space availability, or, Now what they have done now, since we started working with Wheel, is they have what they call the prize puzzle, which they have wheel watchers who watch Wheel. And there's over 4 million people now on the wheel watches, almost 4.5 million people. And if you're watching the show, you can also win that prize if they call your number. So all the prizes are double. In other words, if we're going to the Four Seasons in Maui, we have to get 2 one-week vacations. But it's still less than buying the time.
Yeah.
It's amazing. There's one of the cruise lines that I can't break through, and yet I see they buy commercials in our show. And I see
really?
Them, and I see them. I said, they're paying more than giving me a cabin for 2 people.
Of course.
And so we keep busy, and that's basically what we do now. And
That's really quite a concept. Where did that kind of thing begin? Back in the days of radio quiz shows?
Frank Brazine knows where it all began.
But we'll have to ask him.
It started all the way through when they first did, if I'm not mistaken, is because it was before my time. There was a man named Paul Mosher who was the head of NBC, and they did a local show, and they'd call up and they'd say, how about give me dinner for 2 at Tits Shore, and they'd say, oh, sure, it's not costing you anything, you give out the dinner. So it got to be a local thing, and then somebody said, hey, there's a lot of money, and I can't think of the man's name, but he will know, who had, and every time Bob Hope said something, there was like 100 cases of wine going to his house or something. Right? You know who I'm talking about. I can't think of his name. Rochelle. I don't know. You'll think of the name. I can't think of his name. It was before my time.
Rochelle.
That's it. Yes, he was like the king. He got everything for everybody. But then they called that payola.
Yeah.
And so they stopped it.
Right.
And then so everything is now you have to go and get the copy approved, and you can't name the hotel more than twice.
Oh, so there are rules now.
There are rules. There's always there's been rules for a number of years. But and then there's also there's another thing, like you'll see also Matter White's wardrobe provided by, we've gotten Bernini's, top people, or Botany was the big one that always gave wardrobe, and there was always like a 3-second thing at the crawl, and they provided the wardrobe.
Yeah, you notice the crawls going through now at lickety-split speed, but they always stop on the wardrobe credits, don't they?
Well, some of the things cut half size, and you can't see them anyway.
I know.
They're advertising what's coming on later on. And it's fun. I think I'll be 80 this year, and I'm still working and enjoying it.
Fantastic.
And so it's fun.
You were telling me earlier about how the quiz shows evolved from doing 1 a day to 5 a day. How did that work out?
It happened, actually. Merrill Heater and Bob Quigley were the people that came up with this, because when we were doing some of the shows, PDQ, and especially when we got to Hollywood Squares, there were 9 stars. And that would mean that a star would have to come on Monday, Tuesday, and they didn't pay that much. I mean, the scale on that time when daytime was like $750 you paid, and they did 5 shows. But when they came on, if they were doing a movie, they were plugging a movie. And one of the things that we had on Hollywood Squares, it was a family. People knew everybody that came on the show. We started with Charlie Weaver, Wally Cox. Maury Amsterdam was in the first few shows, but then he was, and the gals were Abby Dalton and Rose Marie, and then the center square on the first show, believe it or not, was Ernest Borgnine.
Oh, is that so?
I ran into him the other day.
Oh.
Then we had Buddy Hackett used to be there, and then when we discovered Paul Lynde, that was he became the center square.
Sure.
But they all knew each other, and they would come out and they would. They socialized together. They'd have dinner. They'd bring dinners, and so it became a family type thing. And there was a lot of fun in the shows, And then we did some locations where we, of course, today would be taking. But we went to Mexico. We went to Canada. We went to Mexico twice. So we did some locations, and all the crew came.
I was in the audience at Hollywood Squares just once, but I was amazed at the complexity of the set. I mean, that was really quite a set.
Yes.
Fantastic.
And that was just done in the office, tic-tac-toe, and that came in, you know.
Hmm.
And there's been so many game shows. They've all been, you know, and the ones that come back, they come back again and again. I'm sure Hollywood Squares will come back again, you know, in a different form, different way. Somebody else with another way of producing it. But that's basically.
Well, the Game Show Network, of course, is perpetuating a few of those too.
Yeah. Now they changed their format. They originally they still have most of the older shows, you know, Tell the Truth and I've Got a Secret, but they also we're just doing a show now called Bingo America, and they're going to have 2 more other new game shows coming up too. When I say we got it, we do the prizes.
Sure.
Yeah, we do the prizes.
How about the new game shows that are sneaking in?
Oh,
I mean,
you mean the Deal No Deal?
Deal or No
the
Deal.
Deal No Deal is
one against
and that was, one against. Well, Deal No Deal. I originally saw it in Europe, and they did a pilot prior to this particular thing and trying to get it going. But he does a great job on this, and it became a reality show. The contestant always brings the band with him, or you know, his whole family, and it's a fun show. There's no, it's do I go on or stop? It's yeah. So it's fun.
Yeah, everyone seems to enjoy it.
Yeah.
Initially on Deal or No Deal, I was fascinated by the fact that the wardrobe department apparently dressed all the contestants because they had the same color, the shirts, the bright colored shirts.
Oh, really? I thought you were talking about the girls that come down, the models.
Oh, the models are fantastic. Yeah.
They're
good.
Too. And you get to know them. It's amazing.
Yeah.
You know, and now you watch it. You know, when you say that's, you know, and you know who each of them are, and they all have a wonderful little personality.
Indeed.
And his fun is his fun.
Well, getting back to the ALISI story, you're a married man. Tell us how you met your wife.
Doing a show. We did a play at the Colbert Theater, which is no longer in existence. I don't know if anybody knows. It used to be on Melrose Place. And it was a small little theater, and it was run by 2 ladies, Fran Locker and Doug Cooper. And they would do, it was equity, and they would do a show. It ran like 4 weekends. And they did a season of 8 shows a season. And I think Robert Mitchum worked there prior. I mean, they tell you all the people that came there, Malapowers and many of the other celebrities who became stars. And we did the first version. I had done it in stock, The Mousetrap, and we did it here at the Colbert Theater. And then they were doing an original play called The Seventh Share After Us. And the man who was playing in it left. And so they called me, which usually they asked me if I would step in and do the role. And my wife, who in the play ended up being my wife, and so I wanted to tell her how intelligent I was. So one of the lines is, "I'm going to buy you a fur coat." So I said to her, "I'm going to buy you a fur coat." And she said, "What are you?" She said later on, she said, "This man must be crazy. He's going to buy." I said, "That's a line in the show." I said, which I did buy her a fur coat later on, which she never wears now, and of course. But that was it, and we met, and then we got married 4 years later. And
that was out here in California?
Yes, this was here at the little Colbert Theater. We met at the Colbert, and we this year will be our 45th wedding anniversary.
Fantastic.
We have 2 sons.
Are they in the business?
One they produced a show called Dealer's Choice and Diamond Head, and it was Fishman Free of production anyway. But Bob Eubanks was the MC for one, and Jack Clark was the MC on the other show. Then they both left. My son lives in Italy now, and he comes out every 3 or 4 months. He lives in Florence, and he enjoys that.
Ooh, lovely city.
Yes, he has 2 children, a boy and a girl, and the other son, who's younger, has a boy and a girl, and they're all, well, the youngest boy, Justin, will be married this year, and the rest of the children are married. And Keisha has 2 children, 15 and 12, so we have great grandkids.
Wow.
And so, the other have not. That's the only thing we have. So we have four grandchildren who are married, and 2 great grandchildren, 14 and 15, or something like that.
Fantastic.
So that's it.
You are a remarkable man.
No, no. And basically, you like people, and that's
well, the fact that you were able to go out on the street and select contestants for a quiz show really amazes me, because I don't know how I could do that.
Oh, yes, you can. Well, it was fun because, you see, I could still do my acting, and all I knew that I had to find 12 people. And so maybe I would come to a restaurant and say, where we go and have our meetings at the
Sportsman's Lodge.
Sportsman's Lodge, and I was saying, "Do you mind? I'd like to set up a booth here when people are coming in for lunch. This is my credentials." And somebody would come in, and I say, "Would you like to be a contestant on television?" First, I talked to them. You can ask them 3 questions, and you can tell right away whether they're going to be good or not. And when I did Hollywood Squares,
what 3 questions?
Where are you from? And this is going to get you. And what are your hobbies? And then when we felt when we asked you if you were from Pasadena, or if you bowled, if you were a bowler, we were never going to use you.
Oh, really?
Yeah, because bowlers are not good contestants. And if they were very square, we'd say to them, "You live in Pasadena?" And we'd be like, not myself, when we'd be sitting out. This is the final breakdown.
Yeah.
And that was our code. And we were put down, "Are you from Pasadena?" So it's like to say, let's not waste any more time. Or do you like to bowl? And we knew that right away. And they'd say, "Oh, yes." And we'd say, "I know, but you're a good." Well, anyway, when we did Hollywood Squares, everybody had an audition on camera. They would sit in the squares. And I would, just by talking to them, Kenny Williams, who was our announcer, and he did a lot of shows, and he would ask them the questions, say where you're from and all. You could tell as soon as they opened up if they're going to be worthwhile. Anyway, and they were all nice people. So
you're also looking, I assume, for people from out of town.
Always looking for out of town.
Not the L.A. area.
Yeah, they were always looking for out of town people.
Yeah.
It was always fun. You always had a better chance
if you were,
because you knew that the person over here would be available.
Yes. Like
last week, I can tell you what happened on Wheel of Fortune, which I don't do the contestants, but there were storms back east, and so they do. They go all around the country finding contestants. Well, these contestants, there was, I don't know how many, but they couldn't come in. So luckily they had a file of people in the neighborhood, and because I could tell every time they said they were. I went to the taping because we did a special week for Princess Cruises. It was called Cruise Week, and when they said they were from Culver City or they were from Covina, those were the fill-ins for that week, and so they couldn't. The other people were snowed in. Yeah. So anyway, yes.
Sometimes I guess too in some of the shows like Survivor, where you have people identified as being from Des Moines.
Yeah.
Darn well they've been living out in Los Angeles for years because they are actors or would-be actors.
Well, originally, I can tell you something that's very funny, is that you used to say you're from Des Moines, and then NBC, with their system, they would say you're originally from Des Moines. You could not say, because if they lived here, you had to say they lived here.
I see.
But you could say they were originally from, and you had to specify. But if the person was actually, sometimes somebody would come in to the studio, and they were here only for one day, so you'd grab them and put them on the show. And yes, but that's true. And the actors, and at the time when we were doing the shows, actors couldn't be. As a matter of fact, I used to get a lot of calls from, and I'd call them after for them, because they said, yes, you can use them, but you have to pay them. And so that was, and they would say, well, I'm on honorary withdrawal, I'm 60 years old, I don't act anymore. But as long as they were a member of the union, you had to pay them, so we could never use actors.
Oh, I see.
But now you can. Now they pay them.
About what percentage of people that you interviewed would you have to say no to? Would you get more than you said yes to, I assume?
Well, there would be, I would say about 100 people for one job.
Really?
My biggest, a lot of people, I might as well tell you, I got O.J. Simpson as a contestant when he won the Heisman Trophy, and I knew he was going to go on Johnny Carson. So I called him, and I said, would you like to make some extra money and be a contestant? Yes, and he came down, because once he became actor, I knew I couldn't use him.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so I got him on, and he won $400, and he was very outgoing. He sat with the contestants, and then he said, where's my money? I said, you have to wait 90 days. 90 days? Most of those things, even some of those people where they win $100,000, it's like $10,000 a year, whatever it is. It depends. Yeah. I don't know what shows we're talking about. But anyway.
About what percentage of people that you interviewed would you have to say no to? Would you get more than you said yes to, I assume?
Well, there would be, I would say about 100 people for one job.
Yeah. That's after the taxes have been withdrawn.
But yeah, a lot of people we had gotten, that, were just starting out in their career,
Mhm.
and so they would come out and try out as a contestant. As a matter of fact, we would say before you go, don't get union. Once you're union, I can't use you.
Mm.
Anyway, but,
Tell us about some of your favorite people that you've worked with over the years.
well, of course, Merle and Bob Quigley, they were just exceptional people. They were very nice and understanding. And on the celebrity end, I guess that's what you're interested in,
Mhm.
is Vincent Price was always a wonderful gentleman. He was always very kind. Rosemarie, I'm still very close with Rosemarie. Peter Marshall, Wink Martindale, Tom Kennedy, they were all, we've known them over the years and worked with them in pilots and stuff. I would say Abby Dalton is still, we just saw her last time at the luncheon. She's still a great person. We never really had anybody that, you say, oh, let's not talk to him. Maybe one person, because he was not all there, and I won't tell you his name, but there was one man that you more or less held back.
Mhm.
He said good morning too, but that was basically it. And he was our own worst enemy. So, and you know who I'm talking about.
Well, you told me you worked with a gentleman who had a reputation, at least, for being very difficult, Orson Welles.
Oh,
King Lear.
yes, he was very insecure.
Uh-huh.
That was when I was an actor, and I did King Lear with him, and he was, he was a young man and became an overnight sensation. He could never equal that. It's like one of my favorite movies is Cinema Paradiso. Well, they'll never be able to do another Cinema Paradiso. They've done other movies which were good. If you'd seen them before, you would say they were good, but now you expect to see Cinema Paradiso. You saw this man do Citizen Kane, and you heard him on the radio. I remember I was there. I heard him for the first time about the Mars invasion. We were so. How do you prove yourself?
Yep.
And that what I think was the frustrating thing. And then I guess what was the second movie which they cut to pieces and was supposed to be a very good movie.
Well, he did Macbeth. It was
yes,
panned.
That was done with a very little budget.
Yeah.
Same thing, Othello, and then some of the things he didn't finish. But at that time, it was a different time, and we're not talking about a lot of money.
No.
And what's the movie he did in Brazil? So there was a frustration. People expected something out of him.
What was your role in King Lear?
Oh, nothing. I was just one of his, one of the nights.
Mhm.
I was just, but we had to audition. There was like 300 or 400 people auditioning for these parts, and all around the block, and then we had to do a little Shakespeare thing, and he was very nice to us. He was very nice to the cast and all. Certain actors, he sort of was not very nice to.
Yeah.
But he could be a very. He was frustrated, I think.
He was a very enjoyable guest on Merv Griffin's show.
Oh, he was wonderful.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Yes, and even on Johnny Carson, his stories were great. He was a brilliant man.
Yeah,
There's no question
genius.
about it. Yeah. And he had Rita Hayworth.
Oh, yeah. Yes. I'd forgotten about that.
That was it, and I saw the lady from Shanghai the other night. It made her she was a blonde in it. It was very successful.
Yeah. Well, Art, have we left anything out of your rather illustrious life here that you'd like to add at this point?
No. But I'm very happy.
Good.
Contented. And it's been a wonderful thing. Comfortable life. So,
Mhm.
do a lot of traveling.
Back to Italy?
Go every year to Italy.
Oh, wonderful.
I go to Italy every year, and it's still the euro is high, but it's okay. They really traveling today is very difficult.
Boy, I guess.
We were talking the other day that you're better off doing a cruise. We were talking about they have a 7-day cruise all around Italy, like for $1,000. Well, you figure out you got 3 meals a day, and you got a hotel room. Your hotel rooms, are so expensive there now.
Sure.
So you're better off taking a cruise. That's least expensive, and it's an easy way to travel. Anyway.
Indeed. Well, Art, thank you so much for joining us
Thank
for
you.
this audio history.
There's so many more people that are much more interesting that you could have gotten, and I don't know how I got into this, but thank you.
I roped you in, that's how. What the heck? Our guest today on this audio history has been Art ALISI, and we're delighted to have him on this February the 11th of 2008. And this is Jerry Fry speaking. Thank you so much for listening.
It was Buddy Hackett. He would come with a gun.
Oh.
Oh yeah, he would come with a gun to the show, and he's a very funny man. But he was, and then he got very bitter when he lost the center square, because when Paul got there and stuff, he got bitter on that. And he was funny. I mean, when last time at the Pioneer Broadcasters, when he said 548 people walked in, how many are going to walk out?
Yeah.
I mean, he was very funny, but he was, off the wall.
Yeah.
He was a very
uncontrollable.
And then when he got the gun, he used to have a gun with him when he came down the studio. Yeah.